Welcome to another deep dive. This time, we're heading to Denmark, at least virtually, to explore this platform called Zandora.net. You sent this website in, and wow, it's quite the digital space, and it's all in Danish. So consider us your guides as we kind of unpack how Zandora positions itself as like this hub for all things sex positive. I think what struck me right off the bat was just the sheer range of what Zandora offers. We're talking like an online marketplace, a social networking component, even a wiki with tons of articles. So ready to jump in.
Absolutely. And I think what's so fascinating here is how Zandora combines these different elements to create this really multifaceted platform for engaging with sexuality in a way that I don't think we've really seen before.
Yeah, and I think it's that combination that really makes it stand out. So
Yeah.
let's kind of like break down these features a little bit. First up, you've got the Zandora market. You can find all sorts of products there. Think like sex toys, lingerie, books, even things you might not typically associate with like a platform like this. They even have this price comparison tool, which I guess could come in handy if you're, looking for a good deal. But honestly, what I found more interesting was like just browsing the product selection, because some of the items, they suggest a real openness, to exploring different desires and preferences, which I think speaks to something kind of like unique about the platform itself.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the variety of products available on Zandora Market, it could be indicative of like evolving societal attitudes, towards sexual exploration in Denmark. It suggests maybe a move away from more traditional taboos and a greater acceptance of kind of diverse desires.
Yeah, and speaking of exploration, Zandora also has this Zandora map, which is basically a user-generated guide to locations relevant to sexual expression in Denmark. So you can find anything from sex shops and clubs to like more discreet locations. I don't know, it's like a crowdsourced testament to how open Danes are about sexuality, even in like public spaces.
That's such a good point because this map, being user-generated, it offers such a unique window into the social landscape of sexuality in Denmark. I mean, it suggests a level of comfort and openness that I don't think you'd find in every culture, right?
Right. I mean, can you imagine seeing a map like that for like the U.S.? I think it would be pretty sparse in some areas. But anyway, let's move on to another kind of key part of Zandora. Their Zandora Wiki. Now, this isn't your average like online encyclopedia. They've got over 500 articles and interviews on this huge range of topics, like everything from sexual fantasies and different relationship styles to gender identity and kink. They even have an article on docking. And no, I'm not talking about boats here.
Right. And this is where I think Zandora's commitment to education, it becomes really apparent. They're tackling this diverse set of topics, some of which can be, quite nuanced and complex. And they're doing it in a way that's both informative and kind of surprisingly accessible, I think.
Definitely. And they don't like shy away from potentially sensitive topics either. Like they have articles about demisexuality, which for anyone who's unfamiliar, it's a sexual orientation where people only feel sexually attracted to someone when they have a strong emotional connection. So it really kind of like challenges those assumptions, right? That we often have about attraction, sexuality. And they also cover things like, BDSM and different kinks, all presented with this focus on like providing accurate information and reducing stigma.
It's true. It's that willingness to engage with, this really broad spectrum of topics that I think makes Zandora stand out. They're creating a space for, open dialogue and challenging those traditional taboos around sexuality.
Totally. And it's not just about, reading articles either. Like if you've got like a burning question or you just need some advice, they have this confidential advice column called Spurg Zandora, which I think is Danish for Ask Zandora.
Yeah.
And basically, users can submit questions to this panel of experts who then provide like personalized guidance
That's
on a range of topics. It's like having a sex therapist on call, but, without the potential awkwardness of like a face-to-face session.
Exactly. It's just another example of how Zandora is trying to create this really safe and supportive environment for individuals to kind of explore their sexuality and get the information they need. They're offering resources and support that might be, difficult to access elsewhere.
Yeah, for sure. And then on top of all that, there's Zandora Connect, which is basically their social networking component. You can think of it like, I don't know, like Facebook, but with a focus on connecting with people who share your interest in, sex positivity and open discussions about sexuality. So it's a space for, sharing experiences, content, maybe even finding like-minded folks to connect with offline.
Yeah, the community aspect is so essential, right, because it creates that sense of belonging. And validation, I think, especially for individuals who may feel, isolated or stigmatized in their kind of offline lives.
Totally. It's like finding your tribe, so to speak. So we've talked about the marketplace, the wiki, the advice column, and the social networking feature. But Zandora, they don't stop there. They also have this news section called Zandora News. And it covers like current events and trends related to sexuality, both within Denmark and internationally. And let me tell you, some of these headlines are pretty wild.
Yeah, I was looking at some of those too, and it's not just about, sensationalism. Yeah, Zandora News also covers some really serious issues related to, sexual rights and legislation and social justice, things like that. They're really engaging with the broader political and cultural landscape surrounding sexuality, which I think is so important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
For example, one headline that really caught my eye was Just Eat Delivering Sex Toys.
Mm.
And that's what I call convenience. But on a more serious note, they also had articles about, potential bans on deepfake porn in the U.S., the legalization of same-sex marriage in Thailand, and even a story about a priest in Denmark refusing to marry divorced and homosexual couples.
It's true. It's that blend of kind of lighthearted and serious content that I think makes their news feeds so engaging. They're not afraid to tackle these complex and sometimes controversial issues, which I think just, it keeps the conversation going.
It's like they're saying, hey, sexuality is a part of life.
Yeah.
It's something, we should be talking about
Yeah.
openly and honestly. But instead of being, preachy or like a lecture, they're using like news and current events as this kind of springboard for discussion, which I think is really effective.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground already, exploring Zandora's features and content. But what does the existence of a platform like this tell us about Danish society as a whole? That's what I'm really curious about.
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's tempting to look at Zandora and assume that, Denmark is this like utopia of sexual liberation.
Yeah.
And while Denmark does have a reputation for being quite progressive, especially when it comes to social issues, I think it's important to avoid making kind of sweeping generalizations. All right, it's not like everyone in Denmark is walking around with a Zandora map in their pocket.
Exactly. Zandora offers us this fascinating glimpse into a particular subculture within Denmark. But I think it's essential to remember that even within a seemingly homogenous society, there's going to be this huge diversity of opinions and experiences. Not everyone is going to embrace Zandora's message of, openness and exploration. And that's okay.
So how do we reconcile the existence of a platform like Zandora with, the reality that societal attitudes towards sexuality are, complex and often contradictory, even in a place like Denmark, which, is often held up as kind of this bastion of like sexual progressiveness?
Yeah. Right. And that's where I think things get really interesting, because Zandora might be seen as this sign of progress, a reflection of kind of shifting attitudes within Danish society. But it could also be a catalyst for, further dialogue and debate. The fact that they're willing to tackle, like you said, these controversial topics like, BDSM and blood play, and even the priest refusing to marry, divorced and homosexual couples. It suggests that they're not afraid to, to push boundaries and challenge the status quo.
Yeah, it's like they're holding up this mirror to Danish society and saying, this is us.
Yeah.
This is the full spectrum of who we are.
Yeah.
Even the parts that, might make us uncomfortable.
Absolutely. And I think by creating a space for these conversations to happen openly and honestly, Zandora has the potential to drive real social change. Whether that change is embraced.
All in Danish society, well, that's a different story.
True. But regardless of whether you agree with everything on Zandora or not, there's no denying that they're making a statement. They're saying that sexuality is something worth talking about, something worth exploring, and something that deserves to be treated with, respect and understanding. Which I think is really important. So what does all of this mean for the future of sex education? Not just in Denmark, but globally. Could platforms like Zandora be the key to creating a more kind of informed and empowered generation? When it comes to sex, it's an exciting thought, right? Yeah, it really is. Imagine a world where young people have access to comprehensive and accurate and, most importantly, shame-free information about sexuality right at their fingertips. It could be revolutionary.
Right. No more awkward sex ed classes where everyone's too embarrassed to ask questions.
Exactly. Platforms like Zandora could provide this safe and engaging way for young people to learn about their bodies, their desires, their boundaries. They could access information that's tailored to their specific needs and experiences, whether that's, exploring their sexual orientation, understanding consent, or learning about different contraceptive options. The possibilities are kind of endless, really.
Yeah, and let's not forget about, the power of those personal stories. We talk about Zandora Unplugged, but imagine those kinds of conversations happening on a larger scale, with young people from all walks of life, sharing their experiences and their perspectives. Talk about, like, normalizing the full spectrum of human sexuality.
Right. It could be so incredibly empowering for young people to hear from others
Yeah.
who have, gone through similar experiences, who have faced similar challenges, and who've come out the other side. It could help them feel less alone, less afraid to ask questions, and more confident in their own skin.
It's like that saying, it gets better.
Yeah.
But instead of just hearing it from, adults or, authority figures, they're hearing it from their peers.
Yeah.
For people who, like, truly get it.
Exactly. And I think when young people feel empowered to talk about sex openly and honestly, it creates this ripple effect, right? It can lead to healthier relationships, better communication, and ultimately a more sex-positive society as a whole.
Totally. So while Zandora may be, a Danish platform, I think its impact could be felt far beyond Denmark's borders. It represents this potential shift in how we, as a global community, approach sexuality, one that embraces openness, education, and respect.
It does. It's a vision worth striving for, I think. Of course, there will always be challenges and pushback from those who, aren't as comfortable with open discussions about sexuality. But platforms like Zandora, they show us what's possible when we're willing to challenge the status quo and create spaces for these conversations to happen.
Well said. So to our listeners out there, we encourage you to check out Zandora.net, even if you don't speak Danish. A little online translation goes a long way. Explore its features, delve into its content, and see what resonates with you. You might be surprised by what you discover, not just about Danish culture, but about yourself as well.
Absolutely. Remember, knowledge is power. And understanding ourselves and each other is so crucial to creating a more inclusive and sex-positive world.
Couldn't agree more. That's all for this deep dive into Zandora.net. Until next time, stay curious. Keep those conversations going. And remember, there's always more to learn. Okay, so we're moving on from Zandora's main features. And now I really want to get into this Zandora Unplugged. Yeah. Because this is where I feel like things get really interesting. It's their interview series, right? And they featured this incredibly diverse range of, like, voices and experiences. It's like, it's almost like eavesdropping on these really intimate conversations about sexuality, but in, like, the best way possible.
It is fascinating. And it's so well done, too, because, it never feels exploitative or anything. It's just very raw and honest and genuinely insightful.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes it so compelling. Like, they have this one interview with Jazz, who identifies as demisexual. And hearing them talk about their experiences, how they don't feel that initial spark of attraction that, a lot of people describe, how they need that strong emotional connection first. It really challenges, like, the conventional narratives that we have around, around sexuality and desire.
Absolutely. And I think by sharing those lived experiences, Zandora Unplugged creates this space for empathy and understanding. It allows listeners to connect with people who might have very different experiences than their own, which I think is so valuable in fostering a more inclusive and sex-positive culture.
Totally. And, like, they don't shy away from exploring, the full spectrum of human sexuality either. They have an interview with Natasha, who talks about masochism and how it plays a role in her life. And hearing her talk about, her preferences, she even mentions, like, her favorite slaggerid scab, which, for those who don't speak Danish, is basically a tool that's used in BDSM. And it challenges any preconceived notions about what's, quote unquote, normal when it comes to sex.
I think that's such an important point because, so often we get caught up in these very narrow definitions of what's considered, acceptable or normal when it comes to sexuality. And Zandora, through these interviews, they're normalizing the idea that sexuality is fluid and diverse, and there's no one-size-fits-all approach. What's important is that people feel empowered to explore their own desires and their own boundaries, in a way that's safe and consensual for everyone involved.
100%. And then, on top of that, they have Lilith, who's really into blood play. We're talking, like, incorporating blood in a safe, controlled way, obviously, into sexual activity. And she talks about, her experiences with the vampire fetish and how it's about more than just, like, the act itself. It's about the power dynamics, the trust involved, the intense connection that it can create.
It's true. And I think it's so interesting to see how Zandora delves into these often misunderstood aspects of sexuality, because by providing this platform for people like Lilith to share their experiences openly and honestly, they're challenging stereotypes and encouraging, more nuanced conversations around kink and alternative sexualities.
For sure. It's like they're saying, hey, let's talk about this stuff. Let's learn from each other. Let's create a space where everyone feels comfortable exploring their own sexuality without judgment.
Exactly.
We've covered a lot of ground.
Exploring Zandora's features and content.
Yeah.
But what does the existence of a platform like this tell us about Danish society as a whole? Like, that's what I'm really curious about.
Right. That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Because it's so tempting to look at Zandora and just assume that Denmark is this, like, utopia of sexual liberation. And while, Denmark does have a reputation for being quite progressive, especially when it comes to social issues, I think it's important to avoid making kind of sweeping generalizations. Right. It's not like everyone in Denmark is walking around with a Zandora map in their pocket.
Exactly. Zandora, it offers us this fascinating glimpse into a particular subculture within Denmark, but it's essential to remember that even within a seemingly homogenous society like Denmark, there's going to be this huge diversity of opinions and experiences. Not everyone is going to embrace Zandora's message of openness and exploration, and that's okay.
So how do we reconcile the existence of a platform like Zandora with the reality that societal attitudes towards sexuality are complex and often,
it's so
we get a place like Denmark, which is, often held up as this kind of bastion of like sexual progressiveness.
Yeah. And that's where I think things get really interesting, because, Zandora might be seen as the sign of progress, a reflection of kind of shifting attitudes within Danish society. But it could also be a catalyst for further dialogue and debate. The fact that they're willing to tackle, like you said, these controversial topics like BDSM and blood play and even, the priest refusing to marry divorced and homosexual couples. It suggests that they're not afraid to push boundaries and to challenge the status quo.
It's like they're holding up a mirror to Danish society and saying, this is us. This is the full spectrum of who we are. Even the parts that, might make us uncomfortable.
Yeah, absolutely. And by creating that space for those conversations to happen, openly and honestly, I think Zandora has the potential to drive, real social change. Whether that change is embraced by all of Danish society, well, that's a different story.
True. But regardless of whether, you agree with it, everything on Zandora or not, there's no denying that they're making a statement. They're saying that sexuality is something worth talking about, something worth exploring, and something that deserves to be treated with, respect and understanding, which I think is really important. So what does all of this mean for the future of like sex education? Not just in Denmark, but like globally. Could platforms like Zandora be the key to creating a more kind of informed and empowered generation when it comes to sex? I mean, it's an exciting thought, right?
It is an exciting thought. Imagine a world where young people have access to comprehensive and accurate and most importantly, shame-free information about sexuality right at their fingertips. I mean, it could be revolutionary.
It really could. I mean, no more awkward like sex ed classes.
Where
everyone's like too embarrassed to ask questions,
Exactly. And it wouldn't just be about, delivering information in this kind of dry, clinical way. Platforms like Zandora, they could actually make learning about sex, fun and engaging. Which, let's face it, is something that traditional sex ed often struggles with.
Yeah, it's like, who wants to read a textbook when you can, like, watch a funny video or listen to a podcast about, people's like real life experiences.
Exactly. And going back to that idea of personal stories, I mean, we talked about Zandora Unplugged, but imagine those kinds of conversations happening on a much larger scale, with young people from all walks of life, sharing their experiences and their perspectives. Talk about like normalizing the full spectrum of human sexuality.
Right. And not just like normalizing it, but also helping young people to realize that they're not alone, like whatever they're going through, whatever they're feeling, chances are there's someone else out there who's been there too. And I think that's so powerful.
It is. It's that sense of shared experience that I think can be so incredibly validating, especially for young people or, still trying to figure things out, still trying to understand themselves and their place in the world.
Absolutely. And when young people feel empowered to talk about sex, openly and honestly, it creates this ripple effect, right? It can lead to healthier relationships, better communication, and ultimately a more kind of sex-positive society as a whole.
I completely agree. It's about creating a culture where sexuality isn't something to be, feared or ashamed of, but rather something to be celebrated and embraced.
Well said.
Yeah.
Well said. So while Zandora may be, a Danish platform, I think its impact could be felt far beyond Denmark's borders.
Yeah.
It represents this potential shift in how we as a global community approach sexuality, one that embraces, openness, education, and most importantly, respect.
Absolutely. It's a vision worth striving for. And platforms like Zandora, they give me hope that a more sex-positive future is possible.
Me too. Me too. Well, on that note, I think it's time to wrap things up. To our listeners out there, thank you, as always, for joining us for another deep dive. We encourage you to check out Zandora.net, explore its features, delve into its content, and see what resonates with you.
You might be surprised by what you discover.
Until next time, stay curious and keep those conversations going.